Hello students, welcome to this video session. This video is specially designed for Ahmadiyya International School students. In this demonstration I am going to discuss the topic memory and storage devices. Without any further delay, we can now jump into our lesson, okay? First of all, I would like to ask you a question. What is meant by the term storage? Okay, fine. Storage is nothing but a mechanism that enables a computer to retain data, either temporarily or permanently. Okay, fine. You know, memory and storage devices can be divided up into three separate groups. First one is primary memory. Second one is secondary storage. And the last one is offline storage. Again, when you see the primary memory, two different memories are there. The first one is the random access memory. The second one is the read-only memory. Okay. Same like that, in secondary storage devices also. We have two different storage devices, okay. The first one is the hard disk drive. The second one is a solid-state drive. Okay. The next one is the offline storage. First let us see what is meant by the term offline storage. Offline storage means the devices which can be frequently removed from the computer system by the user, okay. Say for example the devices like DVDs, Blu-ray disc, pen drives, removable hard disk and so on. Okay, now let us move to the next slide. Now let us discuss in detail about the random access memory. Random access memory is a volatile memory. This means that when the power is turned off, everything that is stored in the RAM is lost. RAM is used to store the programs and data that the computer is currently working on. Operating system needs to be in the RAM, so that it can run. If you want to run a program, or listen to a piece of music, it must be loaded into the RAM first. In general, the larger the size of RAM, the faster the computer will operate. In reality, the RAM never runs out of memory. It continues to operate but just gets slower and slower. By increasing the RAM size, you can make the computer run faster. RAM is much faster to write to or read from than other types of memory. But its main drawback is its volatility. Basically, you know, there are types of RAM technologies are currently available. The first one is dynamic RAM, and second one is static RAM. Before discussing in detail about the dynamic RAM, you must be familiar with two key terms. One is the capacitor and another one is the transistor. Okay. First let us see what is meant by capacitor. Capacitor is nothing but a device used to store an electric charge. I will repeat, listen carefully. Capacitor is nothing but a device used to store an electric charge. Okay. Then what is meant by transistor? A transistor is a semiconductor device used to amplify or switch electronic signals. I will repeat, listen carefully. A transistor is a semiconductor device used to amplify or switch electronic signals. Okay, fine. Now let us see in detail about the dynamic RAM. DRAM chip consists of a number of transistors and capacitors. And moreover, you know, each of these parts is tiny. Since a single RAM chip will contain millions of transistors and capacitors. Okay. Now let us see the functions of capacitor and transistor. Capacitor, this device holds the bits of information like 0 or 1. I will repeat, device holds the bits of information like 0 or 1. Then transistor. Transistor actually acts like a switch. It allows the chip control circuitry to read the capacitor or change the capacitor's value. This type of RAM needs to be constantly refreshed. This means the capacitor needs to be recharged every 15 microseconds, otherwise it would lose its value. If it is not refreshed, the capacitor's charge would leak away very quickly, leaving every capacitor with the value 0. Okay, fine. Now let us see the advantages. First, DRAMs are less expensive to manufacture than SRAM. Okay. Secondly, they consume less power than SRAM. And finally, they have a higher storage capacity than SRAM. Okay. Now let us move to the next slide. Right.
In this demonstration, I'm going to discuss about SRAM, means as Static Random Access Memory. In the previous slide, we were discussing about the dynamic RAM, means the DRAM. Mainly, two RAM technologies are there, right? One is the DRAM, another one is the SRAM. The big difference between SRAM and DRAM is, the SRAM doesn't need to be constantly refreshed because it is using the flip-flops to store actually the data in the form of like binary digits like zeros and ones. What is meant by flip-flop? A flip-flop means it's nothing but an electronic circuit with two stable states that can be used to store the binary data in the form of like zeros and ones. And also when we compare actually this SRAM and DRAM, SRAM is much faster than the DRAM, and the accessing time, if you see the SRAM, it takes 25 nanoseconds, and DRAM it takes 60 nanoseconds. DRAM is the most common type of RAM used in computers because it is cheap and many other advantages are there. Already we discussed about that advantages. And also where actually the speed is essential, there the SRAM technology is preferred. And the processor means the microprocessor or central processing unit uses the cache memory. What is meant by cache memory means it's nothing but the high speed portion of the memory we can tell. It is effective. When actually this will be effective means, say for example, there are programs usually access the same data and same instruction many times. In that cases, this type of cache memory is more effective. Now it's time to discuss about the next type of main memory, that is ROM, means read-only memory. Usually, this type of ROM are non-volatile memory, means it's permanent, meaning the contents of the memory remain even when the power to the ROM is turned off. And moreover, they are often used to store the startup instructions. The meaning is a ROM might store the BIOS program, and the expansion for BIOS is basic input-output system. Let me give a brief idea about the BIOS software. Usually the BIOS software has a number of different roles, but its most important role is to load the operating system. When you turn on your computer and the microprocessor tries to execute its first instruction, it has to get that instruction from somewhere. It cannot get it from the operating system because the operating system is located on the hard disk. The microprocessor cannot get to it without some instruction that tell it how to do that. The BIOS provides those instructions. Usually the ROM contains the program that is used to start up the computer. This is also called the boot program. Usually in many desktop computers, the boot program is also called as BIOS Okay, fine. Now let us move on to the next slide. Apart from this, you should know some more key terms. Say, for example, like embedded computers, general purpose computers, firmware, bootstrap, then EEPROM. The expansion for EEPROM is erasable, programmable, read-only memory, and also flashing. Okay. Now let us see in brief about these devices. First, let us see what is meant by embedded computer. Embedded computer means it's nothing but a computer that is built into a device. Say, for example, it is specially designed to do one or two tasks, and moreover, need to process small amount of data at a given time. Examples for embedded computers like digital watch or central heating control systems, and also like a microwave oven, refrigerator. These are the devices comes under the embedded computers. Okay. The next one is the general purpose computer. These general purpose computers are used for many different applications. Examples for general purpose computers are like desktop PCs, we can tell laptops, we can tell, then tablets and smartphones. Usually, RAM is used in the general purpose computer, hold the operating system, programs that are currently running, and the data that is being processed. Okay. Next, let us see what is meant by firmware and bootstrap. Okay. Embedded devices use ROM to hold the software that runs the device. This software is known as firmware. But in general purpose devices, like say for example PCs or a laptop computer, uses ROM actually to hold the software. That actually we call as the bootstrap. The bootstrap contains instruction that determines the basic hardware instruction. The main difference between firmware and bootstrap is ROM that holds programs that run on an embedded computer, that is the firmware. But the bootstrap, the ROM that contains startup instructions for the computer like PCs or laptops. And what is meant by flashing? The flashing means upgrading the firmware is known as flashing. Okay, like devices, smartphones, smart TV. In some situation, you want to upgrade your firmware. In that case, the user will be upgrading. That actually we call as flashing. Okay. There are certain types of ROM can be erased and rewritten to. This type of ROM we call as the EEPROM, means erasable, programmable, read-only memory. This type of ROM can be found in devices like where actually the firmware may be upgraded by the users. Say for example like smartphones, smart TVs, Blu-ray players. So these are the devices where actually the users upgrade the firmware. Okay. Now it's time to see the differences between RAM and ROM. First, let me tell something about RAM. RAM, it's a volatile memory, means it loses its data when the power is switched off. But ROM, actually, it's a non-volatile memory, means it will retain the data even when the power is switched off. And next one is data in RAM can be modified. That is possible with RAM, but in a ROM, you are not allowed to modify, just you can read that. And mainly RAM is used to store the data that has to be currently processed by the central processing unit. But the ROM stores the instructions required during the bootstrap, means while actually the computer start up. Then the next one about the RAM, it's a high speed memory, we can tell. But the ROM, it's not like that, it's slower when compared to the RAM. Then RAM, the CPU can access the data directly from the RAM. But in ROM, it's not like that. CPU cannot access the data directly. And when you see about the capacity wise, the RAM actually it has the larger size memory, but ROM it's not like that. It's small with a less capacity, we can tell. These are the major differences between RAM and ROM. Before concluding this video session, let me summarize this topic. Mainly, three types of storage devices are there. The first one is the primary storage, second one is the secondary storage, and third one is the offline storage, right? And the primary storage is the internal one, means it's internal to the computer and also it's directly accessible by the processor. And next is the RAM. The expansion for RAM is a random access memory. It's a volatile memory, meaning it loses its contents when switched off. And finally, ROM means read-only memory. It's a non-volatile memory, means keep its contents when power is switched off. Thank you for watching this video.